Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Hope you're all doing well, and you've been enjoying this series that we've been doing. We've been on divine dilemmas. Divine dilemmas. That's been our focus for the last few weeks. And so we started with freedom in captivity, and the focus in freedom in captivity was on when we are captives of the flesh, we are free of hope, and when we are captives of the Spirit, we are free of despair. So that was the first thing that we learned. And then last week, we talked about, what did we talk about? Huh? Courage in the insurmountable. Good one. I forgot that. This is called Second Kid Not Sleeping. You know what this is like, right? None of you should know what this is like, and if you do, shame on you. Anyway, but so we talked about courage in the insurmountable and how courage is so far from arrogance. It's so far from insisting it's your way. It's so much more about vulnerability, weakness, calling out for help, and asking God to work in your life. And so we had the idea to do calmness and anger this week, but Abuna Bulis is going to be giving us that, and he will, God willing, give it to us next week. And I'm working on a speaker for you for joy in suffering, and we just have to make that happen. And so you guys got punished, and you get me again. But we're going to be talking about connections and boundaries. Connections and boundaries. And boundaries is a big thing that we talk about, I think in this generation. And everybody gets really excited when I say boundaries. Because everyone goes, yes, someone tell Mama and Baba to leave me alone. Make them stop telling me to get married and asking what I'm doing every day and why my hair looks funny. If I have, never mind, I stopped. I caught myself that time. All right. Right? And so we have this feeling that boundaries do what? What do boundaries do for us? What do we think? What do we think boundaries do? Let's go. What do you think boundaries do? Nobody wants to say the quiet part out loud? Come on. Huh? Keep us grounded. Okay, that's a great way to put it. What were you going to say? They protect what we value. Awesome, awesome. These are all good answers. What I find is that when people think boundaries, they think this is a way to keep people out of my business. This is a way to get people to leave me alone, let me do me. If that's how you think about boundaries, I'm going to tell you right now, you have a warped and twisted view of boundaries. That might be a byproduct of setting boundaries. But the purpose of boundaries is not to create distance from people. It is not to create suffering. It is not to create unnecessary conflict. Pay attention closely. Boundaries bind us to God and to others in a healthy and spiritual manner as God intended. Again, boundaries are meant to bind us to God and to others in a healthy and spiritual manner as God intended. Barriers separate us from God and from others in a selfish and fleshly manner in the name of self-care and control. Self-care and control. Okay? So if your goal tonight, when you heard about boundaries, was, I need to tell everyone to stay out of my business and leave me the heck alone and let me do me because I'm doing everything fine and my life is good, you are here for the wrong reason. You are here for the barriers talk. And that's given never. So we're not giving that talk. Understand? But if you came for the boundaries talk, you came because we believe that we need to bind ourselves to God and bind ourselves to others in a healthy and spiritual manner as God intended. Okay? So that is the mission tonight, is that we're going to find connection in boundaries because boundaries create connection. Healthy, spiritual connection. And we're still going to upset some people, I'm sure. So it's fine. So with that being said, that was good. Right at the end. What we're going to meditate on is what are the boundaries that create real connection? What are the boundaries that create real connection? And what are the barriers that don't? okay? So that we understand how to create connection in our boundaries. Everybody should walk out of here tonight with one thought about how they can improve a relationship in their life because of this talk, okay? So the first boundary that creates connection is the boundary of space. Space. So, we hear this often when we can't deal with anybody anymore. We can't deal with someone, what do? We got to take space. I need space. I need space from this person. Now, let's talk about what happens in space, okay? Not like outer space, but in the space that we take from another person. What happens? What are some of the things that happen when we're taking space? What do you think? Okay, tell me more about that. A lot of internal battles.
Tell me more. I mean, the first few thoughts are going to be out of anger. But maybe you calm down after. Unless you don't pray about it.
There we go. Okay, so you start having these angry thoughts, right? Because when I took the space from the person, what am I thinking about? Everything that they did, right? This freaking person. They're sitting there taking all this time. Okay? And we do that too. When we take space from somebody because they've hurt us, we're taking it for a very clear reason. We just want to be away from them. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? Bad thing or a good thing? I'm getting depends. Anybody else? Bad thing or a good thing to take space? You say bad. Why bad?
What I do is I just want to confirm my own feelings, and I'll talk to people who are like, oh yeah, that person's that.
Confirmation bias, yes, absolutely. We look for confirmation bias in that moment. So what we do is when we use our space, we use it to create a barrier between us and the person. It's not just the trauma that we're feeling, right? So let's just use an example to make it a little bit more realistic. But we're sitting together and, my best friend, who is a massive show-off, always, once again, shows off and makes this big scene and takes all the attention. I want space. I can't deal with them. I don't say anything because I don't want confrontation. I don't want drama, right? So I just stop talking. And then I wake up and I text to say what they're up to because we'll go study together or we'll go work out or we'll go get food, more likely go get food than anything because that's what Abuna Augustine does. But anyway, that was, I shamed myself instead of you guys calling me short like last week. I remember that and I'm not over it. I'm not over it. Do I need my space? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so you take that time and you think you're going to contact them, but you don't. And then what do you start doing? You start replaying what they did. And then it's not just that it was annoying in the moment. Now it's I'm getting mad. This person always does this. They're obnoxious, they're loud, they're ridiculous. Why are they so extra? And I start creating all this unhealthy space. Because the space is not helping me heal. The space is allowing my sickness to fester. I'm allowing a disease to rot inside of me. So space is healthy and unhealthy, but it's unhealthy when it leads to reclusivity, when it leads to disconnection, and when it leads to resentment. When you are more disconnected from someone, when you take space, you are not creating a good boundary, you're creating a barrier. You know when else is unhealthy? When you start to create a narrative about this person. This person is a problem. They're always the problem. This is when space is unhealthy. This is when the boundary is a barrier. Why? Because it gives no path to the relationship God intended for you. In marriages, that's one of the most dangerous things you can do, is you take space in your marriage. Let me get some space from you. And that space, we don't fill that time with some productive things. We fill it with confirmation bias and then emptiness because we're not around the person. And bit by bit, what's festering? Disconnection. And we're less willing to try to work on the things that are wrong. We either paper over them or we use them as a reason to separate. When is space healthy? When does space facilitate connection? Space is healthy, my brothers and sisters, when we allow space to take us to a place of self-examination. If you take space because you're frustrated with somebody, you're tired of somebody's act, what they're always doing, and you start to say, I need time to cool down. Cool. What are you doing in that time when you're cooling down? It better be thinking about what I'm doing to create this environment. It better be, what can I improve so I can be a better friend, or maybe even reorient this person in the right place. We'll get to reorientation later. But space is healthy when it leads to self-examination. Space is healthy when it leads to the soberness of mind and spirit. And space is healthy when it leads to humanizing the person. Humanizing is not justifying. Catch what I said. Humanizing is not justifying. Right? If we're back to, my friend that's the show-off, that's just him, no big deal. No. That is not understanding. Okay? That's humanizing. There is a weakness here that needs to be worked on. I have to do my part not to activate that weakness. But that person has work to do. Both. Okay? You know where this also pops up? In our families. We take space from a parent, from a sibling, from a spouse, whatever, and we don't use the time to be thoughtful. Just in case you're wondering, when we just take space from our parents, they don't like it. They just get more mad. Okay? That's how it works. ما بكلمش يعني أسبوع وأنت بتعمل إيه? What are you doing? Oh, taking space. حبيبي space. Yeah, okay, you and your space. Tell me more about your space. I'm going to knock you to outer space. بالجزمة. You know you do it. The space that we take with our families better be space that we use to reflect. Yes, dad might have a temper. Mom might be insensitive. Sibling might be very forgetful. And what am I doing? What am I doing to activate those things as well? Am I mindful of my behavior? What I can do better in that relationship? See, that boundary needs to build a bridge. The boundary needs to build a bridge. If it doesn't build a bridge, you made a barrier, you created a different country. Okay? That's a problem. There is one country in the family. There is one country in the marriage. It is the body of Christ. We have a responsibility as Christians to be wise about how we set our barriers with space. You know who really did a bad job of this? King Saul. Our guy, King Saul, the worst when it came to this. King Saul took space a few times. I don't know if y'all know this. King Saul took some space from Samuel, and King Saul took space from David. And in both situations, he created no connection with David and Samuel. None. With David, it just got worse. The more he was disconnected from David, David's in his own world, I'm in mine, the more he hates David because he remembers, this guy's going to take my kingdom. And so when they would get together, it'd be cool for a minute and then explodes again. Why? Because the space wasn't used reflectively. We have to be really careful about this, guys, when we talk about set and space. Because like I said, there has to be connection and boundaries. When we take space, be reflective. Learn more about yourself. What were you feeling in that moment when you were struggling with this person that activated you shutting down? What does this person do that pushes you away? What things do we think are communicable and what things do we have to pray about? Notice I didn't say ignore. Notice I didn't say excuse or justify. Pray about. Okay? You have to pray through these things that are heavy, that get in the way. And so the connection that we have in boundaries comes in seeing how to come together with the distance, not how to remain apart. The time that we use apart needs to be spent trying to find a way back together, and back together correctly. I say correctly because every relationship has a different level of coming back togetherness. That's a word. Don't look it up. I'm kidding. But that's the point, is it's supposed to bring us back together in a way that God intends. And the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 18. In the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 18, this is when it kicks off, okay? Now it happened as they were coming home when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine that the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands, David his 10,000s. Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, to me only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day forward. Eyed, meaning he was paying attention, not communicating. And then you see it here. He took a whole night sleeping on that without any reflection. And what happens? David is playing music with his hand as at other times. There was a spear in Saul's hand. Y'all want to guess where this one goes? Nowhere good, right? Nowhere good. And he says, I will pin David to the wall. David escaped his presence twice. This is the problem, guys, is that when we use space to be more angry, to be more stubborn, to be more aggressive, to be more justified, our boundary has created a barrier. It is wrong. With family, with friends, with our spouse, not okay. Boundaries bring us together. Space is for reflection, wisdom, and calibration. That is the purpose of space. So when you set the boundary of space in a healthy way, you get better for the person in front of you. You understand? You get better for the person in front of you. So the first type of boundary that we can set that creates connection is space. The second one is struggle or confrontation. All right. So, you got to have an Isaac story, right? Got to have an Isaac story. So Isaac has very clear boundaries in our home. Isaac goes to bed when he wants. Isaac determines whether or not there will be vegetables on the plate. These are very important boundaries that Isaac sets. Okay? So Isaac doesn't just set these boundaries by taking space when we put these things on. It's like I put it on his plate and he walks away. No. I put the cucumber on Isaac's plate. I'm not eating that. Okay, Isaac, we're going to try. I'm not eating that. I don't like it. This is yucky. Okay? Fair enough. He's confrontational. He is not afraid to tell me what he thinks. At that point, we debate whether we put it in his mouth and sit on him and make him eat it, or, no, I'm kidding, we don't do that. We've thought about it. I've thought about it. Moving on. CPS doesn't watch these things, right? If it's words, it's not action. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, okay. So confrontation is a way to set a boundary. It's a way to set a boundary. Is to say, I'm done with this. You need to know how I feel, why I feel it. It's not going to work. What is the fear with confrontation? What's the fear with confrontation? What's the concern? Anybody? Losing the connection? Sure. What else? Angry response, not ready for what comes back. Yep. Anything else? Huh? Being wrong. Yep, that's another good one. Absolutely. Confrontation has a lot of not unhealthy, but rather a lot of cons to it, right? Many of us, we worry about getting wounded or wounding someone else. We don't like the idea of it. There are some of us who are like, no, I'm a person of peace. That's my favorite. I choose peace. I'm a person of peace. But if you don't want my peace, you will leave in pieces. Oh, well, that was 0 to 100. But that's a very common thing. Everyone's I'm so nice, I'm very heady, I don't, until you push my, and then you're destroyed. Right? Everyone's like, not me, Abuna. You have problems. You guys are lame today. What is up? Wake up. Okay, all right, that's fair. See, means we need to get a speaker in here. I'm done with you. You guys are worst. Okay, anyway. So, the cons, likelihood of wounding others or getting wounded. What are the pros? What are the benefits of a confrontation? Clears the air. Tell me more about that. You answered.
I mean, if confrontation is good for different occasions, whether it's understanding how another person is thinking at the same time, right? Because it does bring out what each person is feeling. And we're talking about like a relationship issue,
Mm-hmm.
not like regular conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more about like learning what the other person is also feeling at the same time and expressing yourself. But as long as it's going to be done correctly.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of stuff you said there that's important. The general point we're going to take is the benefit is we get out what we're thinking. We get a chance to release that. The question is, are we releasing it in a way that builds bridges or barriers? Some of us, whether we're honest or not, think we know how to have conflict. But conflict is not just when you're calm. Conflict is when you're pushed. What do? How do you react? How do you respond? Anger is a part of us. We were given the emotion. But it says be angry and don't sin. What do you think that really is about? It's about the wisdom of knowing how to read yourself early enough where your anger is not smoldering, but an ember. Okay? It's hot enough where you have to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But it's not so hot that whatever it touches, it will incinerate. When we set the boundary of confrontation that we're not going to tolerate and we're going to talk about what we feel, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we do it in a healthy way? How do we healthily confront an issue? I'll tell you how we do it in an unhealthy way. It's unplanned, thoughtless, and emotionally driven. Unplanned, thoughtless, and emotionally driven. Back to the cucumber. Isaac's confrontation over the cucumber is unplanned. He witnesses cucumber, he reacts to cucumber. It is thoughtless. He has no concept of how this is going to mean an early bedtime for him. And it did. And it is emotionally driven. He has a visceral reaction to the cucumber. But when you put it in Caesar dressing, he's all in. So that's the key. I figured that out. Okay? So the unhealthy component of this is that the unhealthy component is the dressing. No. The unhealthy component of this is when it goes on emotion, it's thoughtless, and it's unplanned. Well, Abuna, that means that healthy must be the opposite. Yes. But here's the thing about healthy confrontation. Okay? Is it prayed for? If you take space, or you're planning to have a confrontation, how many times do you pray about that confrontation before you have it? God, give me the words to bring us together, not pull us apart. Give me the words to be heard, not the words to be ignored. Give me the voice to reach, not the one that has to teach. This is what we have to do. We have to pray through what we feel. I was told once by a very wise priest, when you feel something and you're frustrated, take a couple days and pray about it before you confront it. Unless it's egregious, you will be amazed at how ridiculous it is whatever you feel may be. So we have to pray through it. We have to think it through. What are the consequences? What am I willing to lose? And what do I think I can gain by this conversation? If I think I can gain nothing, if I think it's going to suck, okay, I have to rethink why I'm doing it. And if I think it's going to be very impactful and very transformative, okay, that's maybe why I'll do it. You see, the whole point here is we have to have the wisdom to think through the consequences. And the last thing is your purpose. Oh my goodness, the purpose. When your confrontation is to get even, when your confrontation is to prove a point, when your confrontation is all about smoke and not about substance, guess what? That is not a confrontation to have. That is a confrontation leading to a barrier. You are not only thinking you might lose someone, you have committed to lose that person. You have committed to destroy that relationship. You have committed to create suffering. None of that is wise. None of it. One of the things that I will encourage you for if and when you get married, if you're going to have a confrontation, always begin with the end in mind. Communicate to the person. The purpose of us talking about this, which is very uncomfortable, is to find a way back together. Not to blame, not to pull each other apart, not to create a problem. I wish we'd do that in our friendships. I wish we'd do that with our parents. Parents, I wish we'd do that with our kids. I wish we had the wisdom to say, this is the purpose for why we're going to have a confrontation. That's how you're setting a barrier with what you don't like. That's how you're setting a barrier. You're doing it to build a bridge. You're telling mom, look, it's really, really invasive when you walk into my door and say, okay, you're 29. When are you getting married? Hurry up. I'm getting old. Thank you very much. That is not comfortable. That makes me feel crappy. That's a confrontation. And it's a healthy boundary to set. So when you go and have that, is it, Mom, go away, you're the freaking worst, I know I suck? Or is it, hey, give me some space, I'm not happy right now. And you come back, can I tell you why that was hard for me? Do you have ears to hear? Because the purpose of my conversation right now is to come back together and for us to have a better relationship. And I'm going to tell you that what was hard for me is I felt you're not sensitive to what I'm going through. So please, try to understand that I'm trying to get married. It's not like I push a button and someone falls out of the sky. Somebody bothers you and says, when are you going to get into school? That's not comfortable. That sucks. Why does that hurt? Because you're pushing on my weakness. I feel bad about the fact that I haven't started my program. I feel bad about the fact that I haven't gotten this job yet. I already feel bad. So when you talk about that, it's not helpful. So when you confront constructively. That's how you set a boundary someone can respect. But what usually happens? You are the absolute worst, Mom. Abuna, you're the absolute worst. I can't stand you. I hope that you fall into a pit and break 7 legs. Whatever. I don't know. We say something crazy, right? Because we're hurt, so we have to hurt someone. Hurt people hurt people. We've said that in here before. It's nothing new. Put away the swords, guys. Start picking up the shields, okay? Put away the swords. Start picking up the shields. If it's a boundary you're trying to set, and not a barrier, the shield has the person bounce off so you can talk. The sword finishes the fight, and there's nothing to talk about. You feel me? That's the issue. So when we set boundaries, our boundaries need to be to build bridges, and that's with healthy communication that is thought through, that is prayed over, and that has the purpose of reconnecting in a healthy way. We actually have a perfect example of this in the Bible, our guy Esau. There is Esau part 1, Esau part 2. Esau part 1 is discovering that Jacob stole his birthright. Anyone know how that goes? Poorly. Okay? My man says, I'm going to kill my brother. Where is he? And it's not like I'm going to kick him in the butt. No, it's I'm going to kill him and take back my birthright. Why? Because it was thoughtless. It was emotionally driven. And it had no purpose to build. It was unplanned. But fast forward through Jacob and Esau's life. When Jacob has his 2 wives, and here's Esau's coming. And of course, Jacob's peeing his pants because Jacob knows what he did wrong. But when Esau comes, do you think Esau didn't know Jacob was scared? No, he did. Why did he throw himself at his feet? It was he was building a bridge. He had a purpose. He had a purpose. He was attempting to connect. Esau had a confrontation. He still talked about what's going on so that they can reconnect. You got to have a purpose. You got to have a purpose. And that's the power of boundaries, is that a connection will form. In confrontation, connection forms in confronting when we set limits with one another that do not trample on needs, but trample on wants. Catch that again. Trample on needs, not wants. Connection, boundaries, and confrontation create connection when we set limits on trampling on needs. Not trampling on needs, but trampling on wants. I'm going to explain this a little bit because I know it's a little confusing. When somebody is having a confrontation with you, they are running over your needs and your wants, and you're setting the boundary, and you're trying to stop them. You don't take away from somebody what they need. For example, you have to have a relationship with your parents. There is no negotiating on this, okay? There is no, I'm not talking to you, you're the worst human being. No, it doesn't exist. Why? Because that's a need. But are we going to talk about me getting married every 7 seconds? Abso-freaking-lutely not. Why? I can trample all over your wants. Because if it's your wants and my wants, I want more and I'm going to take mine. Because it's me, my piece. Okay? But needs, you never trample on needs. Does that make sense? You guys get what I'm saying? Trampling on wants in confrontation is fine. Trampling on needs is not. And when I say trample, it doesn't mean you're unkind. Okay? You're still respectful when you do that. There's a big difference between a need and a want. A need is God-given. A want is man-driven. Okay? A need is God-given. A want is man-driven. So, that leads us to the self-control, and that comes in the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. When our emotions do not lead our confrontations are constructive. When our emotions hijack our confrontations, there are no boundaries, there are only barriers that are very hard to break. So, first way that we set boundaries is space. Second way that we set boundaries is confrontation or struggle. The last one is reorienting or segmenting. This is the hardest one, okay? And this is the one that causes the most issues when we talk about boundaries in our lives. Everybody has a person like this in their lives, whether it's you that's on the receiving end or they're on the receiving end, where you think you're BFFs and you're super, super close and you tell me everything about yourself. So you think I'm your best friend. And I'm over here like, I'm just a Buna. That's not the same thing. So then he's like, well, what's going on in your marriage? Nothing, I'm telling you. Why? It's a different relationship. How you view me, how I view you. That's not saying, I mean, whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. You get my point, okay? I used myself as an example, and I realized I made you all think I don't care. I care about what's going on in your life. Don't take it the wrong way. Anyway. And so there is this missing of the minds. And what happens? Somebody always gets offended and upset. They're not as close with me as I am with them. They're not as vulnerable with me as I am with them. And this resentment starts to build. And so what has to happen? There has to be a reorientation. You hear this a lot of times with parents. Habibi, you used to tell me everything. You told me when you went to the bathroom, and it was so great that you told me because I knew you went. Now I don't even know what you ate. Haram. First off, you do that, it's between you and your parents. It's fine. Fine. All right? But there's this feeling of, I've been giving, and you're not giving, so now I'm not gaining. And what happens? Everybody thinks you don't like them. Everybody thinks you can't stand them, or you feel like that person can't stand you, and what happens? Division, separation, falling apart. Now we have a big problem. Why? Because we're not in the right spots. We're not in the right buckets. I got news for you guys. Not everybody that you talk to, not everybody that you grew up with, not everybody who is in your immediate family is your best friend. It's a fact. And it's okay to not tell them everything going on in your life. Sorry. You don't like it, you like it, I really don't care. That's a fact. Now, does that mean you withhold from people what they need to know? No. Everybody has something they need to hear. But one of the ways we set boundaries is we reorient people, okay? We put everybody in their appropriate bucket. When I did this in the boundary series last year, I broke it down like this. So we'll do it again. There are three buckets. There's the stranger and acquaintance circle, okay? Strangers and acquaintances. This encapsulates most of the population. These are people who, when you see them, you're kind. You show them the light of Christ. You're not very close with them, so they don't know a lot about your life. But you know each other and you're cool, or you don't know each other and you're cool. The second, and this is the catchy one, or the tricky one, is your core. Your core. These are individuals that many times you grew up with. Sometimes they're related to you. People that feel like you're their BFF, but it's not the other way. And this is also an important circle because it's smaller, but it's still very big. There's still a lot of people in here. And in this circle, it's again a serving circle. There is an element of you supporting others and correcting others and also being willing to be corrected, but there is still limits on what you share. Why? Because you're not guaranteed that it's going to go the way you need it to go. And then there's this. That is the inner circle. This here, this is no more than 3 to 5 people in your life. Usually, your spouse, parent, a parent. I don't tell you, that's up to you. Potentially a sibling, a BFF, and a father of confession. Why? This is a receiving circle. This is a circle where you can say anything, do anything, and you are supported. You are validated. You can receive calibration and encouragement. You are not judged or put down or feel like your standing in their life is affected by whatever you've told them. Okay? Here's the problem. These two circles get really mixed up, the core and the inner. And it happens when we have a squad of people that we hang out with. We got 5 or 7 guys. Everybody says, we're all boys. Yeah, we're all boys. We share everything. And then you find out that, Falafel 1 and Falafel 2 are super tight, and Tamea 6 and Tamea 7 aren't. And it's like, what's going on? Right? I realize it's the same thing. I know. It's fine anyway. But what happened? And so people start getting frustrated. Like, I thought we're all boys. It's like, well, you told him stuff you didn't tell me. We're doing this right now? But why? Because everybody puts somebody in the wrong bucket. Unfortunately, this happens a lot where people who are in the core think they're in the inner circle. And you know what they do? They start invading. Sorry, sometimes it's your sibling, sometimes it's your parent, sometimes it's your friend, and they start correcting. What were you thinking that was so stupid? How could you do that? I don't believe you. You know what you have to do? You should do this. Like, did I ask you? Why? Did I ask you why my relationship failed? Did I ask you why I didn't get into med school? Did I ask you about this problem in my life? But I know. It's like, but I don't feel safe. I don't feel emotionally secure. I don't feel comfortable enough in that space. Sorry, that's a fact. Does that mean that you don't share with your parents? No, it doesn't mean that. And there are things that you share at the right season. And there are ways to share it. And that's a fact, because you have to be able to communicate about things in a way where somebody can reach you, connect with you, make you feel important, make you feel heard, make you feel like you're still the arbiter of your decisions. You have agency. That's the problem. When we have poor boundaries, everybody knows everything about our lives, and they talk a bunch, and we take everybody's advice the same, we value it the same, or we don't value it at all. We're extreme in either way. And so when we reorient people, this is how we set the boundary to protect ourselves. Because it's like, okay, I need to put you in the proper bucket. Whatever, we'll call it, Teta whoever, who just every time she sees you, you go to give her a hug. I miss you. Are you married? Hi, Teta. Do we talk to Teta about our relationships? No, we don't anymore. We've stopped. Why? Because when we talk to Teta about our relationships, she makes us feel bad. She is too old. He's too fat. He's this. She's that. This is too late. Blah, blah, blah. What are we doing? That's not a person that we're putting in the core. We're not putting them in the inner circle, We're not putting them there. Now, here's the problem with reorientation when we talk about boundaries. You know the mistake that we make? Is we use reorientation to freeze people out. Well, Abuna said, I don't have to tell you anything. Don't ever say that. Because that's the last time you see me, all right? So, no, you don't use reorientation to kick people out of your life, okay? You do not remove people from their God-given role. Again, you do not set boundaries to remove people from their God-given role. So when is reorienting healthy? When it creates a more meaningful and bidirectional communication, where it's beneficial to both. If I'm talking to my parents and I want advice, I'm letting them in. That's setting the right boundary. I want help with this, but not with this. I've reoriented this person. Same with a friend. Same with a spouse. Like, there's certain things. Now spouse goes in the inner circle. There's no messing around with that. They're in the inner circle, okay? But the point is, the people in your life that are in your core, sometimes we're making the mistake of trying to push them into the acquaintance section. And you know what happens? Well, they have a God-given responsibility to you. They have a God-given responsibility. You cannot take that away from them. So when we push them out of where they're supposed to be, what happens? They become angry. They become resentful. They shut down. They cause problems. And you're like, well, I don't know why they're up in my life. It's like, no, I know. Do you see what you're doing? They're not reoriented. They've been evacuated. It's not the same thing. So it's important for us to remember that when we reorient people, we are putting them in the right place in our lives so that it's a meaningful connection. It's a meaningful connection. And this is what real love is. Okay? Guys, I've said this before. When you look at the relationships in your life that matter, your spouse, your family, your friends, all of these relationships, everybody deserves something. Everybody deserves something. But not everybody deserves everything. Not because they're bad people, but it's what they do with the access they're given. Do you understand what I'm saying? What they do with the access they're given. If we feel that a sibling is extremely critical every time we talk to them about our life choices, guess what? You're in the core, bro. Yes, you care about me and I care about others, but guess what? You are not there to support me. You want to stop me from making choices instead of praying that I make godly choices. And you have become less of a resource for me at that point. Once people become those we criticize often or feel that we're criticized by often, we shut them out. That's what we do. We don't want to hear it anymore. It's the same with our family. As we get older, okay? Sorry, apologize, you're going to hate me. I told you it was coming. As we get older, we are given more agency. We are given more autonomy in our lives to make our choices. And parents evolve from being caretakers and directors to encouragers. That's their job. And what happens is because of sometimes, unfortunately, possessive love, they try and stop it. I can't stand when I hear someone say, "You're not getting this person over my dead body. You're disowned." Who are you? Sorry, this person's a grown person. What are we doing? It's not a thing. It's not a thing. People have to make their choices. You will lie in the bed that you make. And as long as you have spiritual guidance and you have guides in your life, and your parents are part of that circle, to be clear, then you make your choices. And may God bless your choices. Make them in a godly way. But parents don't control, siblings don't control, friends don't control, not even spouses control. The choices that we make in our lives, this is what I'm saying. When we reorient people and put the boundaries in place correctly, then the relationship functions as it should. Where we look and say, okay, this is someone that I value their opinion. I look for their encouragement and their guidance and their support. And I reach out to them for that. Versus having my hands tied and being told, I'm going to live the way you're telling me. Forgive me. That's not godly love. Did the Lord tell the Pharisees, I gave you all these chances to come under my wings and you didn't listen? Yeah, he did. Why does the King of Kings accept our boundary? And other people don't. And on the other side, why don't we accept those boundaries as well? If you are the sibling that is controlling, if you are the son or daughter that is controlling of your parents' decisions, or the friend that always has something to say, reorient yourself. Who are you? When you have been asked for advice, give it. That's accepting the reorientation. And all of this is godly love. I'll leave you with this verse or this phrase from St. Augustine. He says, it is the fierceness of love, a fierceness without bitterness, in the way of a dove, not a raven. The fierceness of love in the way of a dove, not a raven. So it's important when we accept boundaries from others and we set boundaries, that we set them as doves, not ravens. What does that mean? The dove is an emissary of peace. So don't take what I'm saying about setting a boundary with a family member, setting a boundary with a friend, setting a boundary in your life as your permission to be unkind, cut someone out, tell them to go away, tell them that they're invasive and they're awful. That's not the answer. The answer is to have an honest conversation for the sake of putting people in the right place so we can benefit from everyone. And we can still be the ones who make the choices that we are called to make. So to sum it up, the 3 ways that we set boundaries that create connection. Space. We use space to be self-reflect and come back together. Struggle. We use confrontation to be productive and resolve issues. And we think it through. And that we segment or we reorient. That we put people in the appropriate places so that they benefit from us and we benefit from them. May each one of us in this season choose the life of connection in our boundaries, not using the words that we have to build barriers that break apart families, lives, and love. Christ intended none of that, and neither do we. And glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. All right, this is a harder topic, so I figure that there will be some questions, but I don't know. Yep.
There are exceptions to every rule.
Yes.
Who deserves barriers?
Who deserves barriers? Great question. Who deserves barriers? So, even in setting barriers in family, there are ways to do it, okay? Because there are God-given responsibilities that we have. So, Every exception requires prayer and spiritual guidance to know exactly what we're supposed to be doing with it. So if there, and the other part of that is, it's never one instance. Let me be clear. When we talk about setting clear like creating barriers with people, there's a pattern that needs to exist. And it's not the pattern of, oh, they're so toxic. No. Actual toxicity. This person actively steers me away from God. This person actively puts me in an extremely dangerous scenario in my life. This is when we're talking about, we have to set boundaries, okay? When this person is sucking me away from God. That's why even divorce is granted in exceptions, right? Because there is an exception to every rule. And the exception I'm talking about is adultery, to be clear, right? And so the church will allow that because now we're talking about having to set a barrier. This no longer works because this sacrament has been broken. So when you are dealing with the idea of an exception, number one, find out what the trend is that you're seeing that's affecting you. What is the consistent trend that you're getting from the person or the situation? The second thing is start praying about it. God, is this someone that I need to reorient or I need to evacuate? Right? And the third is have spiritual guidance. Have spiritual guidance. Sit with your father of confession. Talk it through. This is why I think I need to be not seeing this person ever. Okay, you might be right. Sorry, guys, in most cases, you're not. You're not. In most cases, you're reorienting. Instead of going to Tunt whatever's house, every week to listen to them curse your life out, maybe you're going to go on Christmas and Easter, and that's okay. And you send text messages and you pray for them and all those other things. That's fine. There might be a scenario where you reorient. But reorientation requires a lot of thought, and evacuation requires even more. So it's not something that we take lightly, because understand that when we do that, which, guys, sadly, many of us do, you see the consequences of evacuating somebody from your life. The poison that all of a sudden starts flying at you and starts consuming your group. It's never good. So if you're going to do it, there better be a good freaking reason why we're going to do it. A really, really good reason. Yeah. That's all right. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yep.
This is a two-part question. What is a good prayer to pray when you're setting a boundary? What's a good prayer to pray when you're setting a barrier? Or what you want to, you have a feeling you have to set a barrier?
Okay. Good question. So what do I pray when I want to set a boundary? What do I pray when I need to set a barrier? Or if I'm thinking about a barrier. So with a boundary, the first thing you're praying is, God, give me eyes to see what I can improve before you give me the wisdom to ask for a boundary, okay? Let me look at myself first. Understand? That's it. And then the second part is when it comes to a barrier, God, if I can't see another way to reorient this person, show me a way. If I can't see another way to reorient this person, show me another way. Or if not, make it clear that I need to move on. Make it clear. I think we were clear about it here, but I'll say it again. Barriers, we're talking about extreme toxicity, threat to life, threat to your spiritual life, serious threat to your spiritual life. Oh, he parties, and I can't control myself. I don't care. That is not the answer because you have poor self-control. That's not. That just means you see that person in places where they have to be a good person. You understand? But somebody who, is bringing people over to your house and is, involving you in unhealthy things without even your consent, okay, now we're talking toxicity. This person has no respect for any of your boundaries. Your barriers come when you've tried to set boundaries and they fail. Right? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a great point. So here are the things that I think are important when you're determining whether or not you need to have a confrontation. I think the first thing you have to do is you got to spend some time in prayer thinking about it. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Once is an aberration, two is a trend. Data matters. Okay? Somebody did this thing once. They could have had a bad day. But, whatever, Tassoni pick me every day. She's always looking for attention. Okay, then maybe I have to think about this. Like, this person, is something showing up consistently in this relationship. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, how does it affect you? One of the things that's crazy when you think about a boundary you want to set is sometimes the reason you're setting the boundary is your own pride. It's your own pride that is the reason you want to set the boundary. Well, they're too showy, or they're too loud, or too this. But it's because I want to be loud. I usually am in control of the conversation. I'm the center of attention. You're a threat to the crown. Okay, now we have a problem, right? Because this means you've not done your work. But when this person's unhealthy in the way they're behaving, that's different. So you have to look for the trend, find out why it's bothering you, and if it's a you thing or a them thing, praying about it, and getting spiritual guidance, okay? Most of the time, I will encourage people to confront, because I believe that undelivered communication leads to unmet expectations, and unmet expectations always leads to upset, right? Especially, forgive me, ladies, girls are very mean to each other. They don't say anything, and your energy, oof, you guys be running people over with those force fields. It's not nice, okay? There's a word for it, but I'm not going to say it because I'm on. Discipline today, my friends. It's 3 letters in case you're wondering. All right. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah.
There's an individual that I deal with who's a chaotic force.
Are you talking about me publicly? Yeah. I said chaotic force.
I've had a lot of instances where I've been put in very difficult situations with this individual, but I'm having a hard time balancing that boundary.
Yeah.
Because there's also been moments where this person will ask me about my faith, have really productive conversations. It looks like they're going in one direction,
Yep.
and they go back. I just don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I've already had the conversation.
Sure. So you've already confronted. So there's distance now. Okay. So when you have a situation where you've already done the confrontation, it's more about sitting with the results, right? Sitting with it a little bit, let the dust settle. Because what happens is when you have a confrontation, most of the time, people get in their feelings and they get butthurt. And they're sitting on it, and then they complain to their friends and blah, 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 blah. Give it 3 to 6 months. You'll be amazed how people want to have a conversation, want to follow up when the door opens the right way. But don't stop praying about it. I'll tell you guys a funny story. This is like years and years and years ago. But I was like, I'll tell the story offline. Never mind. I'll tell another time. I thought about it. I'm going to hold it. I'll keep it. Don't worry. I was in high school, so it was harmless. You had a question? No. You and your hair. It's always your hair. That's why. Anyway. Questions? Yes?
What do you do if you have someone in your inner circle, God-given responsibility,
Yep.
that you can say 95% of the things that you want to, and they listen to their love and support. 5%, they don't agree, and it goes down a bad hole.
Yep.
They're offended, they're frustrated,
Yep.
and it becomes a temper-filled fight.
Sure, that's a great question. So 95% of what we talk about is great in the inner circle, but there's 5% that is explosive and harmful. So part of it is wisdom of knowing that that 5% is untouchable, unless that 5% is something that is unavoidable. And then you have to really ask yourself, well, if that 5% is unavoidable, is it really 5%? It's probably a bigger ratio of the interactions. It's just, it's been limited to 5% for the sake of peace. And in that instance, that person's probably a core person, not an inner circle person, especially if that 5% means a lot to you and means a lot to them. The more something means to somebody, the more of a ratio it takes in your heart, right? And so that's why you have to be wise about who you let near those big ratios. And I've talked about this before. Usually in confession I talk about it, but now I'm going to get myself in trouble because people are going to see what I do. But it's fine. 2 boxes. It's a big T box, little T box, okay? The little trigger box are triggers that you can tolerate in your life. Someone gives you feedback in these areas, you can deal with it. Oh, Abuna, you're gaining weight. Oh, Abuna, you're not as tall as I thought you were. Abuna, your voice sounds dumb. Okay, all of these things are completely correct criticisms. I'm fine with all of it. I cried home afterwards by myself, but it's cool. But I can tolerate that conversation. You can come into the tea box and I'm good. Come and talk to me about how to parent my kid. Yeah, welcome to my big tea box. Come and tell me how to build my marriage. Welcome to my big tea box. You have no place in that place. My father confession exists in there. My spouse exists in there. My spiritual guide and my best friend exist in there. My mirror exists in there because I love the way I'm kidding. But nobody goes in there. You know what the problem is with us guys? We let everybody in the big tea box. We're insecure about school, work, marriage, relationships, and we're like, all y'all come on and give me your feedback, and then we're wondering why we're having these blowout arguments. What are you doing? Come on now. Come on now. Have conversations with the people who can have them. All right, so everybody has a big tea box. Nobody in the big tea box is not supposed to be in the big tea box. Feel me? Does that answer your question? The follow-up question, okay. I had a feeling it was going to take a little longer. I'm sorry about the pizza getting cold, guys. We'll survive. Uh-huh.
Say you decide to
Yep.
orient,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep it from them.
Yep.
If they find out and they feel offended, hurt,
Mm.
make
So you reoriented the person. They are offended and hurt by being reoriented, and they're out of this thing. Part of reorientation is sometimes a conversation, right? You're not telling them, I am moving you into the core. It's just saying, I think this is a charged issue that when we talk about, we hit heads, and it means a lot to me and it means a lot to you. So we need to do our part to not talk about this for the sake of our peace and our relationship. And then what you've done mentally is you've moved them into the core, right? We don't make these announcements. When we make announcements, we're ruining things, right? Because it's more about the proclamation than it is about the execution. Does that make sense? Good question. Someone had a question in the corner over here? I saw one here too, but anybody? Did I miss? Okay. Yeah.
After
Mm-hmm.
after the reorientation, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how even to ask the question. I'm just wondering, when you have a God-given
Mm-hmm.
inner circle person,
Yes.
and you decide that you want to reorient them to the core,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's also this God-given responsibility to have, well, not God-given responsibility, it's more like expectations that you're supposed to keep them in the inner circle. Right? And
Yep.
And that's
You're supposed to keep.
a tough conversation because that 5%, which for me might be 50%,
Mhm.
or maybe
Yeah.
75%,
Yep.
affects me in a way or another. But at the same time, if I decide to just like not, just
Mhm.
ignore it,
Yeah.
like it won't affect me.
Sure.
But in a sense, I have a God-given responsibility as well. So that's where the clashing head happens. What can I do? Because
Yeah.
there are expectations.
So let's talk about that. There are expectations. Many times, expectations come from a very close friend, a sibling, or a parent. That's where those expectations come from. And my favorite thing is honor your father and your mother. Obey your parents. Obey your parents in the Lord. And parents do not provoke children to wrath. So don't use the Bible one way, use it both ways, right? Honoring your father and mother isn't always telling them every single thing that's going on, right? Especially if there is a polarizing view that's not rooted in a spiritual viewpoint. Okay? So sometimes it's rooted in a cultural viewpoint. Sometimes it's rooted in a personal preference. Get bent out of shape to accommodate them, right? You don't have to get bent their way to accommodate. Like, there is a balance. If it's not something that's spiritual, okay? You know, if I'm hearing, and this is it, it comes up in our career and it comes up in our spouse choice. That's when it really comes up. Well, I need to be involved. Well, yes, you do need to be involved, without a doubt. But are you the one making the choice because they're from Suhaig and they're from Masr Gadid? No, it doesn't freaking matter. We're not going on vacation together. I don't understand why you think you have an opinion here. It doesn't matter. But if your concern is this person is a drug addict and doesn't go to church and doesn't believe in God, You have a real point. That's fine. Okay? But she's not funny. She doesn't joke with us the same way. She's not like our family. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? Nothing. Diamonds are formed by pressure. Give people a chance. And so boundaries, in those areas, they feel like they're supposed to be in it. They're not. They're a part of it. There's a big difference. And someone that's in your core can still be a part of that experience, just not in the decision-making process. Right? There's a big difference. If you are doing this the right way, and that's why I said I picked career and spouse because that's the one where we hear about obligation more than anything. You have to make sure that your father of confession is standing with you on this. That if you're taking a career path that's unorthodox, that you've got a real reason why you're doing it, and you're willing to go down that road and sacrifice. Okay? Like you might not get support, and that's fine. And the same in your marriage. You might not get support. But if you're marrying someone for the right reasons, you see someone as a spiritual partner in your home to build a church, and the reasons that they're giving have to do with financial status, have to do with social status, sorry, not a thing. Tell me if you think, mish khuddam, and what does that mean? So because they're not a servant, they don't serve? How can you say that? Service starts where? In the home. You have no clue what their service is. So I don't do this, and that's not a thing. And any priest will tell you that. Yes, those things are on your mind, but they're all secondary. And if a family member or a friend or a parent is in that conversation and they're lifting those things to the top as the non-negotiables for why, you're out. That person is not the person to be talking to about this. Are they things to consider? Yes. So anyway, to answer your question, I went on a long-winded rant and got myself in trouble, but it's cool. Like, the point of what I was trying to say is there are people who feel they have an obligation to be there. Everybody has an opportunity to be in those circles appropriately. They have the obligation to figure out how to function in that circle. And you have the obligation to make sure that if you are reorienting someone, you are doing it for spiritual reasons, not reasons of pride. I don't want my mom in there because she's a fob. What does that mean? That's wrong too. That's dumb. That's not the answer for why your parent's not in your circle. That's not the answer. The answer is not, oh, well, you don't know anything about religion because you're not born in here. What does that mean? No. If there's a reason that they're not in there, it's because of the viewpoint, like I talked about before. But if they are in there saying, you make the choice, I'm praying for you, God needs to be foremost in this. Keep an eye on these things, and I'm with you. Okay. That person's earning the part in the inner circle now. That's the receiving circle. I see you, I hear you, I support you. I don't have to love everything you do to accept what you do and to love you despite what you do. Welcome to living like Christ. Okay? Does that answer your question? Kind of? What did I miss? Jeez. Confrontation? Okay, cool. That's good. Anybody else? Do you know what timestamp that was? Let's pray.